Audiobook presents The Fist, a tale by Emilia Pardo Bazán. Those who remember this story place it in the years when Marineda was still one of those peaceful and semi-drowsy towns where the greatest individual tragedies precisely occur. The somber line of fortifications still surrounded the town like an iron belt. Communications were difficult. It was believed that no event could be shrouded in mystery, and that people lived as if under glass. And yet, drama beat in favor of the same swampy calm. The frozen tranquility that enveloped the city divided into two groups. The old town, with its churches, convents, and public buildings, the court and the captaincy, and the fisherman's quarter, with its humble houses and emerging commerce. At the edge of the open space that separated the two halves of the city, in one of the ancient streets, very steep, so steep that it bore the poetic and graphic name of the Street of Bitterness, you can still see the dwelling where the incident took place. It was and is of a poor facade, shabby on the outside, with a cramped, fetid, and damp entrance hall. But if you climbed the blackened staircase and managed to cross the second door, strong and secured from the inside by heavy bolts, that gave access to the living quarters, you understood from the first moment that it was neither small nor very poor. It was sordid, which is different. The narrow economy was evident in 1,000 details, and at the same time, among the overly modest furnishings whose service was prolonged beyond the humanly possible time, sometimes a clear sign of comfort, even wealth, appeared. A silver jug, splendidly chiseled on the sideboard. A superb English clock, of the type that had just begun to be used, in the living room. A carved and damask screen. A painting on copper, with all the hallmark of Rubens, above the sofa. And this was because the inhabitants and owners of the house were dealers, as they say there, in jewelry, silver, and furniture, and ahead of the modern second-hand dealers, they often traveled to villages and small towns, bringing back valuable and meritorious objects, which they resold advantageously in Marineda and Estella, to the aristocracy of the blazoned mansions that can still be seen in the beautiful streets of the old city. The two brothers, the Tomés, were both semi-hunchbacks and extremely clever and resourceful, in addition to being so frugal that a legend was forming around their fortune. Richer than the Tomés, was commonly said in the neighborhood, and they became furious, protested, cried, bought the cheapest fish and scrawny chickens in the market square with sighs, but it was no use. Richer than the Tomés. The Tomés had no servant. They were misogynists, and between buying and selling precious objects, they cooked their own stew and swept their own rooms. When asked, they claimed reasons of economy. The truth was that they feared the servant might steal the treasure they hid in a hiding place known only to them but that the devil could reveal to her. And they lived thus, in terror of robbery, waking up every night with their hair standing on end and their shirts soaked with sweat, trembling from the nightmare that had just shown them their hard-earned wealth taken by a villain who, not content with taking the money, stabbed them with a long, sharp dagger before fleeing. It is fair to say that these visions were mainly experienced by the elder of the two, Jesús, who was simple-minded, though shrewd in his business dealings. Farruco, the second, on the other hand, distrustful as a fox, was resolute, and used to mutter under his breath when robbers were mentioned. Let them come. They'll see what's good. The most unusual thing of all, the reason the atrocious event occurred, was that no one knew at that time that there were any thieves in Marineda, or at least a gang of robbers capable of organizing to assault a house. But if in Marineda the presence of such elements was unknown, it was murmured quietly that in El Farol there operated a serious and organized gang, which included personalities whose names were whispered without being clearly spoken. Such astonishment and scandal involved direct accusation. Notaries, merchants renowned for their honesty, even judges of the court. They were part of the secret protectors and directors of that criminal association, whose coups were always against manor houses where treasures were kept in good golden coins from the last 3 reigns, and against mail coaches carrying valuables. In short, to collect substantial loot, never to dabble in petty thefts. The gang operated rarely and for hefty gains. While planning the blow, it lay in wait. The Harshagia, the terrible captain general, did not advance a step against this association, nor manage to uncover its crimes until later, when, replaced as the political and military head of El Farol, Another was put in his place, a colonel named Don Tomas Zamalacaregui. At the time of this episode, Michelena was still the chief, and the gang had the country terrified. The two Tomé brothers, in their dining room, lit by a triple wick lamp, had just finished dinner. They had closed the door, following the patriarchal custom of the time, at nightfall, and after some complicated and lengthy accounts of their latest dealings, they sat at the table at the 10 o'clock chime. It was winter. It rained tenaciously and steadily, and the gutters, serving as drains, made a muffled and vehement noise, like sobs interrupted by a spasm of pain. The silence was deep. No one passed through the street, and in the old beams of the ceiling, the scamper of rodents echoed furtive and mocking, like the mischief of a hidden imp. After dinner, having said their drowsy rosary prayers, the brothers, having cleared the table, resumed whispering passionately, for they were not of the same opinion. Jesus, the fearful one, communicated to Farruco, the brave one, for the 100th time, his terror of keeping in the house the wealth gathered at the cost of labor and privations, and murmured, "You say this is safer than hiding it in the village. I say no, and will always say no, because if we cleverly hide it in a corner of the country house, as we are not there, the thieves will enter. They will not find us to torture us and make us confess the secret of the hiding place. They will not demolish the house, and they will be thwarted. Whereas here, if they enter and tie us up and torture us, we will have to confess, and they will take in one night the work of our entire life." Farruco, smiling, replied, "It's not that easy to get in here. The hiding place is good. In any case, they would take a few silver trinkets. And if they kill us, brother?" insinuated the little hunchback, trembling. A flash of ferocity passed over the yellowish, bilious face of what we could also call a hunchback, though his back was less curved. He clenched his fists, bared his teeth, and murmured, "Well, we'll see. Just let them come, man." The clock struck 11, with its silvery sound, and the chimes fell between the gurgle of the rain, like a reminder that time goes by with life, while we plan things that may never come to pass. At the very moment when the pendulum let its last vibration die away, Jesus murmured in a tone of terror, "Silence!" His look and gesture said the rest. At the door of the staircase, locked with double bolts, a peculiar sound had been heard, similar to the teeth of a rodent, a cautious and persistent ricky-ricky, the gnawing of steel on the resistant wood. In moments of danger, instinctively, someone takes command. Seeing his brother pale, Farruco ordered, "Put out the lamp quietly. Take off your shoes. Get the small kitchen lamp and a rope, the one for hanging the hams." Jesus obeyed his younger brother, protesting with a sort of muffled sigh of fear. What should have been done was to immediately lean out of the window and alert the neighborhood with shouts, because, undoubtedly, seeing themselves discovered, the thieves would flee. But, weakened by terror, his will yielded to another will that danger found serene, violent, iron. The elder of the two hunchbacks did everything he was told, and, at a signal from the younger, like a cowardly soldier entering battle against his will, he approached the antechamber carrying the small lamp in his trembling hand, walking with such care that his steps made no noise. Farruco put his finger to his mouth and then pointed to the door. This time it was not the timid gnawing of the furtive and persistent mouse. The saw was now pressing firmly. From outside they were making a wide, round hole, so that the thief's hand could fit through it, and by sliding the bolts, open the entrance. Jesus felt ice on his temples. His heart was hammering like a forge. But Farruco, imperious, imposed himself, and they waited, not knowing what was to come. The hole grew rapidly. The hand was skilled. The hand. Jesus's trembling increased at the thought that soon, through the opening the fine saw, whose steel snake-like end they saw, was making, a human hand would appear. Oh, profound horror! A living hand, perhaps armed, more terrifying for the ignorance of what body it belonged to. And, indeed, the saw hastened its bites. The wooden roundel wobbled for a moment, fell among sawdust, and the hand appeared, hairy, strong, eager for the prey, like the mouth of a mastiff. But before it could touch the bolt it sought, Farruco, quick as lightning, tied it with the slipknot, pulled and tied the hand, hanged and contracted, to the strong latch of the door, the very bolt it intended to slide. The hand resisted desperately, struggling to free itself. Farruco tightened and strained the strong, greased rope so the knot would slide better. And not a voice outside or inside, not a moan, nothing, just deep and dreadful silence. After the last knot was made, Farruco smiled contentedly. "Now," he said, "the mouse is in the trap. Now, fool, is when you can call the neighborhood." And so they did. And terrified, some neighbors began to come down to the street. The brothers did not dare open the door or approach it. From the balcony, they explained, "There's a thief. He's tied up. He won't be able to defend himself. Come up. We have him tied up, securely." The crowd of neighbors, who indeed were already coming up armed and furious, shouted in unison, "There's no one! There's no one!" And then the brothers dared. They unbolted the latch, turned the key. The hand was there, stiffened, pale, like a dead spider. Only it had no body. And on the landing, their feet slipped in a pool of blood. And never, never was it discovered who the owner of that horrible severed hand was. A trail of red drops was lost in the adjoining alleys. Where had his companions taken the mutilated man? Where did they hide him? How did they treat him? Who assisted him? Bah! Let us not forget that in the formidable gang there were doctors, pharmacists, judges, nobility. The elder of the Tomés was so affected that he died shortly afterward, leaving all his fortune to hospitals and for his soul. And then the true wealth of the Tomés was known. More than 3 million reals each. For that time, a fabulous amount. Yendi.